So welcome everybody to our meeting with the head of the IUCN Asian Rhino Specialist Group of the IUCN and the chief executive and founder of Aaranyak in Assam, our partner organization for the protection of rhinos. Dr. Bibhab Talukdar, we are so pleased to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Now you have this fancy title, chair of the IUCN Asian Rhino Specialist Group. So tell us a little bit about what that is and what that work entails, that role.
Well, the role of the chair of a specialist group, in my case, it is the Asian Rhinos. So basically, to coordinate with the range country governments, we have members. The members may be the government officials, maybe the scientists, maybe from any discipline that can contribute towards conservation and management of rhino population and their habitats, in the wild. So as a chair, my role is more like a coordinating with different activities that the group has identified to be as a priority. One of the important, mandatory tasks, I would say two mandatory tasks includes, one of them is the submissions of a joint report that IUCN Asian Rhino Specialist Group, African Rhino Specialist Group, and a traffic report to the CITES Secretariat for every conference of parties on the status of African and Asian rhinos in terms of trade and overall population.
CITES. Bibhab, what is CITES? Because some people may not know what CITES is.
Yeah, the CITES is basically the Convention on International Trade on Endangered Species of Flora and Fauna, which is an initiative of the United Nations in 1973. And so far, there are close to about 200 countries across the world who has decided to help each other in order to check the international illegal trade on endangered species of flora and fauna. The CITES main office is based in Switzerland, and the conference of parties meeting cells in many countries, based on the decisions taken in the earlier conference of parties meeting.
So you are responsible over coordinating all of this and overseeing it for all the Asian rhino species. So
right.
Most people, when they think about rhinos, they think about African rhinos, not so much about the rhino species that are in Asia. So could you tell us about sort of how many rhinos are left roughly, and where they live in Africa and in Asia?
Well, in Africa, I think it's well known and it's easy to remember, like white rhino and black rhino. The white rhinos are having 2 horns, black rhinos are having 2 horns. And it is more focused because of, the publicity and also, because of the number of range countries with regards to African countries are comparatively more than in Asia. So the African rhino population, as estimated in 2021, the black rhino population is about 6,195 in the wild. There are other populations, about 218, black rhinos in ex situ, whereas in case of the white rhino, there are about 15,942 white rhinos in the wild and 1,077, white rhinos in ex situ. So if we say, the both black and white rhinos in the wild is about 22,137. And if we say, white and black rhinos, including ex situ, then the population is 23,432 that has been estimated and that has been reported to the CITES, COP.
Great. Yeah, that's quite yeah. And,
yeah. So that's the African perspective. Now, right. With regards to the Asian perspective, remember, we have one species more than African continent. So there are 3 species of Asian rhino. The greater one-horned rhinos are mainly found in India and Nepal. The Sumatran rhinos, although it was earlier found in South and Southeast Asia, but of late it is only being restricted in Indonesia. Same is the case with the Javan rhino. Now, as a whole, Asian rhino population in 2022 is 4,124. And if I can bifurcate, like the greater one-horn rhino population is 4,014, Javan rhino is 76, and the Sumatran rhino, that has been reported to the CITES COP is 34, maximum 47. So that range. So if we see the whole scenarios, African continents are having larger numbers, like the black rhino 6,000 plus, the white rhino 15,000 plus. But whereas we have tiny populations like Sumatran rhino, which is now less than 50, as I say, 34 to 47. So they are critically endangered. Javan rhino 76, but compared to 10 years ago, its population is slowly picking up. And greater one-horn rhino, of course, this is the only species in recent history that its status in IUCN red list could be downgraded from endangered to vulnerable. So that word downgrade looks a little bit of negative. But in fact, this is a positive news. Downgrade actually reflects the success in conservation. Okay, so I think for greater one-horn rhinos, both the RAN countries has made significant effort that has led to downgrading of its status from endangered to vulnerable. I think the conservation success is more how much species we can downgrade rather than how much species we can upgrade from endangered to critically endangered or vulnerable to endangered.
Yeah. So Bibhab, you say, there are, that you mentioned some quite small numbers, and in Africa, you have more. But if we're looking some years back, how do the numbers that we have today in Africa and in Asia relate to, more historical figures?
Well, if we see the African, probably the white rhino populations, maybe 6 years ago, it's close to, 20 to 21,000. But it has declined now, and as I mentioned, in the wild, the population is 15,942. So there are significant decline, and it has been reflected, in the official document of the African Rhino Specialist Group, or in that matter, all the range countries' governments. Whereas the black rhino population, despite the poaching, pressure in African continent, there have been, we have seen a marginal increase from 5,100 or 200 to about 6,195. So I think if we see the poaching trend in Africa, I think it's mainly the white rhinos that has been targeted in past few years. We have seen, the sudden increase of rhino poaching incidences in the African countries, especially in South Africa. And at one point from 2013 until about 2017, over 1,000 rhinos were killed illegally in African continent. So 1,000 rhinos means every day 3 rhinos. So that's a huge loss. Yes. And that is the result we have seen that, the white rhino population has declined compared to what it was, because the death rate has increased compared to the birth rate. So I think, the effort has been made by the African countries despite the challenges. And we could see marginal decline in the poaching figures in the African continent. 2020, there was 503 poaching. 2021, it's about 5,030 or 40, close to. So from 1,000, at least it has reduced a little bit. But I think there's a long way to go to check, these incidences of, increased poaching, especially in African continent.
Okay. And why are so many rhinos being killed? Why are people poaching rhinos? What's the reason behind that?
See, there are illegal demands, in the market, and the market lies in Asia. We all know, the investigations carried out from the African continent also lead, the pointing fingers to the Asian market. Even whatever, poaching incidences or illegal killing incidences of rhinos has been reported from India and Nepal, everything generally goes to the Asian market. Of late, we have seen, the Indian government and Nepal government could make, the effective steps to reduce, the number of poaching incidences in India and Nepal. Last year, we lost about one rhino. The Nepal also perhaps one. But if we see Nepal in past 5 years, probably they only lost one rhino. In that case, India, probably whole of India in the last 5 to 6 years, probably about 10 to 15 rhinos, compared to if we see, hundreds or thousands in Africa. So I think there is something, a learning experience lies with the Indian and Nepalese government steps that perhaps, some of the African countries can explore. So what are the steps that has been taken in India and Nepal that has led to decline in poaching? Despite the pressure, see, our geographical location is very close to the market, okay, in the Asian continent. But it doesn't mean that they didn't try. I think the poachers, smugglers, they tried their level best because this is the nearest one. But somehow they found probably the protection system is challenging here to kill the rhinos easily, as they could have done probably, a decade ago or 2 decades ago. So now the pressure is more on African continent. I have seen, they are also copying up. They are also trying to improve, wherever. But I think, means if neutrally, if I see, there could be very learning lessons from India and Nepal for the African countries.
I couldn't agree more. And not only are you closer to the Chinese and Vietnamese and other markets, you also, I heard from, as far as I'm aware, that the Asian rhino horn, because it's smaller and denser, is more sought after. It has a higher price than is more sought after by those people who want to buy it. So, well done. Congratulations. And I could not agree more. There is a real lesson to be learned. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that later in the talk. So, what is the rhino horn actually used for, Bibhab? Well, why do people poach it? Why do they want it?
Because there is a demand in the illegal market. It has been used for traditional medicines. It has been also used, for decorative items. So these are the two major, the needs in the illegal, market. It's mainly on beliefs, for which the rhinos has been slaughtered in many parts of Asia and also in Africa. And not only the live rhinos, because the demands are there for illegal rhino horns. The horns were also stolen from, a lot of European museums during 2010 to 2014. So nowhere, the rhinos or its derivatives, especially the trophies, are safe. Whether in the wild or in, even in museums. So because of there's illegal demands, and most of the demands I feel because of the notion, because some people somewhere they believe that it may help them, to get better health. But people without using rhino horns are also having better health.
Yes. Yeah, I hear that unfortunately in Vietnam, it is also increasingly become a status symbol where people, have it as something to show off their wealth and their social status, like you would wear a fancy watch or have a fancy handbag or drive an expensive car. And it's used for even trivial things such as hangover cures, which has nothing to do anymore with the traditional medicinal use. So it's a real shame. So we are quite, as you quite rightly say, we can all live quite happily without it. So, and the rhinos, there are not enough rhinos left in the world to meet the demand that exists. So we have to stop it. So, why is it so difficult to get a handle on this illegal trade? A lot of money is spent in South Africa, in Southern Africa, around the world. Lots of NGOs, lots of government bodies, lots of international associations and local organizations are trying their best to stop this. Who are the people who are driving this, and why is it so difficult to get a handle on it?
This illegal wildlife trade is the fourth largest illegal trade in the world after narcotics, human trafficking, and arms. So this is a well-organized syndicate, that operates across the world. And they keep their eyes, where, which sites may be more preferable for them to operate on. And since, this illegal trade, also holds a lot of illegal money, so sometimes somewhere some people, gets entangled. Okay. And because the lust for money in the minds of few people are sometimes so high, probably they, find it difficult to differentiate ethically as a human, what is human and what is not human, inhuman. Okay. So because there is illegal demands, there has been a pressure, but I think it is not difficult to control. Not every countries in Africa are having poaching issues, despite pressures. And even if we see in Asia, the India and Nepal in past few years has been able to decline it because of the effort, because of the commitment, because of concerted, efforts being made, engaging local people and strengthening the protections, collecting informations, doing eco-development activities as a whole. So I think it is not difficult. I think what I feel, it needs a strong commitment of the government agencies. Because especially in Asian countries, all the rhinos belongs to the government. Whereas in African continent, there are private things. Where it is private, it is the responsibility of the private agencies to enhance, the protections. If it is under the government, domain, then it has to be, the responsibility of the governments as the owner and custodian to protect the rhinos and other species. So I think that leadership, that commitment, that will is very important. And sometimes government wills also depends how aware is our people. Okay, so citizens, awareness on rhinos are very important. If I see the Nepal and Indian context, the people are very, emotionally attached to rhinos. There are hue and cries, whenever more rhinos are being killed. And that ultimately, put pressures on the government to initiate extra measures that would reduce the number of poaching, and that could also restore faith on the people that the government represents, that this government is capable of delivering.
Yes.
So I think, that is very important, that the government is of the people, by the people, for the people, as we all know.
Yes.
So as long as government listens to the voice of the common people, for the voiceless animals like rhinos, then I think government can take lead. We have seen successes, not only in Asia, also in African continent. So I think there are learning experience. We need to find out, which countries are more affected and why. Whether there are some system failures or there is something that needs to be analyzed. We should not cover up. If there is certain wrong, we need to, concentrate and try to find out ways and means how best we can improve.
Yeah.
And I think it is not difficult. But government commitment, the leadership of the government is a must. Government has to lead. We all others, NGOs, civil societies, our role is to complement the effort of the government.
Yeah. So that's quite an important point that you made. So one is that there has to be an uncompromising and honest commitment to protecting these animals. There has to be buy-in by the people to want to protect them. And that has perhaps something to do, if I understand you correctly, with how you look at rhinos, whether you look at them as a treasured part of nature, or as something that could make money. So if it's a business interest versus something you care about, because it exists as part of nature in itself. And that's an important difference, I think, between some parts of Africa and India and Nepal. And I thank you for having that difference, and your your successes speak for themselves. So you spend a lot of time in caring for and trying to help protect the greater one-horned rhino, or Indian rhino as it was called. Most people have never heard of Indian rhinos, perhaps in greater one-horned rhinos. So would you tell us a little bit about that species? So introduce the greater one-horned rhinos to our listeners.
Okay, I think the greater one-horned rhinos is one of the prehistoric animals that still survives, in India and Nepal. Earlier, its distributions was throughout the, eastern Himalayas, mainly along the riverine areas. This is actually, a species that prefers grassland rather than tree forest. Whereas, in case of the Sumatran and Javan rhinos, they prefer tree forest. This is a grassland species, but they also need, the wetlands, because ultimately it's not the dry grasses that helps them much. It is the wet grasses that can give them nutritious food.
Yeah, so we can see that on the pictures, both yours and mine, yeah?
Right. So the wetland and grassland compositions are very important. And I think wherever rhinos are still alive, it is because of the availability of those kind of habitats currently in India and Nepal. They are, generally they are solitary, but I have seen even, 10, 12 rhinos, 20, even in Povitra, sometimes it's 20, 30 rhinos using the same habitat without any fighting. I think infighting happens only during the breeding season. Otherwise, they accommodate, they are well understandable, and that is something we humans need to understand a lot from, this wildlife and the rhinos. The mother is very, careful about the babies, about the calves. So whenever calf are around, means calf is around, the mother is extra protective. That is the time when sometimes mother may chase a tourist vehicle. Okay, so the best way is to learn their behavior and keep a distance, because everybody needs privacy. Okay, so if we enter into the bedroom of a mother and calf, definitely mother will be angry. Yes. So I think that understanding we need to have. Otherwise, I have seen, rhinos are very calm, quiet, disciplined to some extent, I would say. The prehistoric animals, they still survive, means, they can adapt to certain changes, but not to the rapid changes. Okay, and that is why for future of rhinos, along with enhancing protection to protect rhinos from the illegal, poachers or the smugglers, it is also important to concentrate on improvement of habitat, because it is the habitat, that will feed them for a longer time. And as the populations in India and Nepal for greater one-horned rhinos has been found increasing, we need to manage the habitat, to give them the optimum level of food, the nutritious food they need.
Yeah, which I imagine is not easy in India, a quite densely populated country. So that will have challenges, won't it?
But then I think there are some good news which I need to share. That in past, almost 18 months, the Assam government has taken steps to increase the size of our existing rhino-bearing areas. So Orang National Park, where we are having about 125 rhinos, is actually 78.80 square kilometer. Now, government of Assam has, issued notification to add another 200 square kilometer.
Wonderful.
Okay, to the Orang National Park. So now the area of the Orang National Park is actually 278. So it's a 2.5 times areas has been added. So I think that is a long-term commitment of the government. The thinking was long-term, that if we can contain land, the excess populations can roam around. Similarly, in Kaziranga also there has been about 10 additional additions, and its size, the earlier size has already been doubled. Okay, so I think there are steps that has been taken in India, despite the fact that India is having the second largest human population in the world. Having the second largest human population in the world that our government, the Indian government, can still think of adding more areas to a wildlife or rhino bearing areas is something, that sends a strong signal about the government's commitment despite many challenges. There are always good things happens, bad things happens. Bad things sometimes get more, publicity, but the good things, that has been taken sometimes, doesn't get, that desired publicity to reach out to the people, that there are some steps the governments are taking in the rhino range countries. I am just citing the examples of India because I know there are examples from Nepal and other countries too. So I think that those are the things that needs to be appreciated by the people. So the government also get confidence. Yes, that means we have taken certain good decision.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's fantastic news, and long may it continue. Now, when you say you are working, to protect the rhinos, and the government is making efforts, and you are working, so you're working with, presumably with the government department, with the forest department, as it's called, the wildlife department in India, and presumably the police. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, our role, we place our role as a complementing, agency. Like in Assam, like Aaranyak, I have been the founder, I am the chief executive officer. We see, our role as a complementing, as a connecting, agencies that can, bring all other agencies together, to achieve the common goal. Because as I said, India's protected areas, and in that matter, the wildlife, the custodians are the government. So whatever steps governments are taking, we are complementing, we are trying to suggest also, if certain measures needs to be taken. So it's a good win-win situations. We sit across, try to flag certain issues, both negative and positive. Okay, and there are steps being taken by the governments that keeps the momentum of civil societies going to to complement the effort of the government. So I think means we also need to look at the challenges the government are facing, because it's not the government's responsibility. Sometimes doesn't restrict just to wildlife and the ecology. There are economy, but the balance between ecology and economy is always important. If we only put emphasis on economy, and if we don't give much emphasis on ecology, ultimately that economy is going to suffer at some point of time. Okay, maybe for initial, gain, we may get more economy, but economy without emphasis on ecology will be a disastrous situations for human being.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that balance is very much essential.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And obviously, you're getting that quite right. Now, the next question is, we are talking here together because there is a link between, your work and my work, and we're really proud to support what you do. And one of the ways that we support you is by sponsoring a sniffer dog unit that you are making available to help the forest department and the police to keep rhinos safe. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the sniffer dog unit and how it's helping? And yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Well, I think thank you very much, to the People for Nature and Peace, the organization based in UK, for supporting one of the K9 units. The female dog called name is Emmy, and the handler is Biraz. So they are now being put in the further western range of Kaziranga National Park as per advice of the Kaziranga National Park authorities. So that range office is known as Bura Pahar Ranch, Wildlife Ranch. And the Emmy and handler stays there in the official accommodations being provided by the national park. So again, you can see here, it's a 3 agencies partnership.
Yes.
You are supporting us. We are implementing, the whole K9 units in Kaziranga, and the national park is also providing, the basic the accommodations thing. And when it is in Kaziranga National Park, it runs under the directions of the national park authorities. So our dogs are basically we have provided for the utility, and utility are basically done by them. There are normal patrols being done by the canine units, sometimes specific, duties. So the dogs have been trained, properly. Thanks to, again, people for nature and peace for supporting even the training. That has led to, at least the dog can sniff, dog can, can track, and at least has been able to give some vital clues to enforcement agencies, to go to the next level of investigations. So we all know the capabilities of dog is basically sniffing. And we humans, despite having brains, we are not capable of sniffing the way the dogs can. So this is a very important tool that has been used. There has been, quite a demand now in other rhino-bearing areas because of the, the clues the dog units could provide. So I think there's an added tool that has been used in Kaziranga National Park. I am sure, the canine unit is going to help assist more and more. And more they assist, more they in the national park and police officials get clue, ultimately the more success they can achieve in order to curtail the illegal trade on wildlife or rhinos or illegal killing of rhinos in our national park and wildlife sanctuaries.
Yeah, we are really thrilled to be supporting you and Aaranyak and the dog team with, food and salary for the handlers and field equipment and veterinary care and whatever else there is. We're really pleased to be able to make a small contribution towards helping to keep Assam's beautiful rhinos safe. Now,
I think, when small is always beautiful.
Yeah.
The effort is important. That small effort actually triggers something new. So, so small, I will always feel small is very beautiful. And you have been consistent in supporting. That also, gives us extra, confidence that we can run it, as it is required. So I think, whether it is small or big, if in your case, if it is small, even then it is widely acceptable. If it could be bigger, it will be again widely acceptable.
Yes. Well, whatever we can raise will go straight to you and the rhinos.
Right.
I also wanted to say, you sent me some photos or sent us some photos, and I often see our dog Emmy and her handler with a very impressive looking all-female ranger team. Now, tell us, I'm really interested about this. This is unusual, particularly in India, to have, female rangers at all, and then to have an all-female ranger team. And I must say, they look quite fierce. They mean business.
Well, I think, about 7 years ago, 7 to 8 years ago, Assam government has decided, to create a special rhino, protection force, especially to be deputed in the rhino-bearing areas. And these females are basically part of those force, and they are well trained. And that also reflects, that our governments, while protecting rhinos or in taking initiative to protect rhinos, are also looking at the strength of the women power. And we have seen, these women are so dedicated. Working in the field is not that easy. Doing patrolling in the national highways in any conditions, like 38 degrees Celsius of heat, humidity. But I think the commitment the ladies force are contributing towards conservation needs, a strong applause. That's something, if you can see, that the dog units in Burapahar are mostly accompanied by this, the ladies team, because they are active. They don't want to be, just sitting idle. So whenever the opportunities arise, they take the lead, in the patrolling and the vigil that could, deter illegal entry of, unexpected people into the national park,
Yes.
doing illegal things.
Yeah, I really look forward and hope to meet them on our next trip with
You are
the
welcome.
dog trainer. I really look forward to that. And of course, we haven't seen each other in person for a long time because of the COVID situation. So despite, we've talked a lot about poaching and the threats and what you and the Forest Department and Indian government do to hold back the ever-present threat of poaching. But despite that, and at the moment all trade in rhino horn is illegal, but despite this pressure and despite the ongoing decline of rhino populations in Africa and Southern Africa in particular, in Kenya, the numbers are also going up. There is talk again and again about opening the trade in rhino horn and making, selling rhino horn internationally. So what is the view of the, the Asian range states, or your view, or the Indian government's view on this?
Well, means I cannot speak on behalf of any of the governments, but I can highlight that in 2019, the second Asian Rhino Ranch State meeting was held in New Delhi. The Asian Rhino Specialist Group was one of the co-hosts of that second Rhino Ranch State meeting held in New Delhi. The New Delhi, the Rhino Declarations was signed by the 5 Asian Rhino Ranch countries: India, Nepal, Bhutan, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So all the 5 countries, as ranch state, has mentioned, that they are not supporting the illegal, the wildlife trade, and they are not in support of opening, the rhino horn trade, at least in the Asian context. So that's the official position of the 5 rhino ranch countries as per the declarations they have signed in 2019.
Yeah. So even if only the trade was open, say, for some African populations, as will be discussed at the end of this year at the CITES meeting, do you think that would have an impact on the poaching pressure in other countries, not just other parts of Africa, but also other parts of Asia where there are rhinos, including Nepal and India?
Yes, and especially, from the Asian context, our rhino populations are much smaller. And once, somewhere, if rhinos are sold legally because of a certain permits, it may also trigger some sort of lust for money, which the government, especially in India and Nepal, has been able to control through, stringent protection measures and also through, the public awareness. So, it may send a very wrong signal in the Asian rhino ranch state. Okay, so we need to see, how it goes, because the whole conservation awareness in the Asian context, especially in the ranch countries meeting, in the ranch countries, we are basically valuing the role of rhinos in the ecosystems, so the awareness about, its existence, values, and we, especially our government, just recently, last year in 2021, September, the World Rhino Day, the Assam government has burned down about 2,400 pieces of rhino horns, sending a strong signal that we don't need rhino horn to protect our wildlife. Okay. So, because governments want to send a signal that rhino horns have value as long as it is on the head of a live rhino. So that is where, again, I say it depends how, the different continent, different countries looked at, the animal, whether they look at the animal only from the economic point of view, or they also look the animals from the ecological point of view. Okay. So that's, I think, a factor that every government needs to look at. Every governments are having their own freedom, being a democratic country, to decide. But let us also think, that we are deciding for an animal that cannot speak. So we need to volunteer our, whatever knowledge and other things for these speechless, animals who cannot come to the big meetings, conventions, global conventions, to speak about them. So I think that is where I think let the conscience play an important role to take the decisions that can ensure that rhinos live for years, and that also ensures, that there is a proper balance between the ecology and economy. If we just give more and more emphasis on economy, as I said, it may also affect the ecology. And we have seen, the climate change's impact. We have seen the nature's power in last 2.5 years, how they are powerful to put us, almost in the jail, during the COVID period. So I think let us think more humanly based on the knowledge that we have, and take a judicious way forward, keeping in mind that the animals we are talking about cannot speak.
Yes. And besides, I mean, even economically, so many people from India, from other parts of Asia, from all over the world come to Kaziranga and these national parks to look at the rhinos alive.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, for me personally, when I first saw them, you showed me my first greater one-horned rhino. It was an experience I will never forget. And I invite anybody to come and see rhinos and see the challenges they face and see the beauty of Kaziranga and the other national parks in India where they live, to appreciate them in an environment where nobody talks about looking at them just as an assembly of parts that can be marketed for profit. Now, Bibhab, one last question, and it's been fantastic to speak to you. If you had a magic wand and you had a fairy who would grant you one wish to make a difference for rhinos, what would you wish for?
I would probably put my energy to manage humans rather than the wild animals.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer, and I agree with you. We're really thrilled to work with you. Our partner organization, NABU International, of course, has been funding also dog units. So we are so thrilled to be working with you. I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for making time for this conversation about your favorite animals, and for educating us about your daily challenges, telling us about this wonderful species. And we'll see you in Panama at the CITES meeting, and long may we work together to help protect these wonderful animals and their habitat. Thank you, Bibhab. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.